within the confines of what we're discussing and how we discuss them, we have María López Solás from Iberia. We have Joanne Tan from SQ, Singapore, and Leanne Geraghty from ANZ, New Zealand. Thank you one and all for joining us. I think the issue is putting aside, what is, do you see, the fighting ground when it comes to the passenger? What is it that you are focused on in a post-pandemic world, outside, if you will, the core commercial aspect of the price?
Yep. So from our perspective, we're very much focused on providing customers with a seamless customer journey. We're focused on making sure that we're delivering what we call the basics brilliantly. So the really basic elements of just getting the flight away on time, arriving on time, and making sure people's luggage arrives with them. So that is like one of our main focuses at this time as we rebuild out of the pandemic. Now,
the interesting thing about that is, you call it the basics, which it is, but that really is the starting point, isn't it? I mean, and that, it shows just how disrupted the ecosystem and infrastructure was when you're really basically saying, get the plane out, get it to a destination, and get the passenger there with their luggage.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that we're doing a great job in terms of that, and that gives us the license to start innovating and putting out some of the great things that we've done through COVID.
I think you need to be true to the customer. What the customer really wants is to reach on time to the destination. So that's why, for us, the most relevant thing is be very reliable, operationally reliable. We have been the most punctual airline in January and April, and we are really putting all our efforts, all our employees working together to make sure that everything is working perfectly to be perfectly on time.
Right, but that's a fairly low bar, isn't it?
Well, depends. This is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think, we talked about seamless travel. A lot of the opportunities now for seamlessness is also riding on data. I think the first two panels talked a lot about it. For example, seamlessness in today's context is also a little bit about low touch. So for example, biometrics. In flight, instead of doing shopping by catalog, it's really ability to do so digitally, in-flight e-shopping. So really, I think the customer expectation is certainly the basics, but also the basics in a digital and a little bit more seamless and touchless experience.
Right, so how significant are the, accepting the basics, how significant are these, I don't want to say they're not ancillaries, because they're crucial to the core experience, but at the same time, the focus of all these extra, the retail opportunities, the distribution channels of the tickets and those sort of things?
I think core to this, and LG touched upon it, the customer just wants to arrive with baggage. I know it doesn't sound like it's a huge thing, but I think in the last year, when passengers were traveling and not getting their baggage, the basics are really, really important. The rest of the things that you're trying to sell them, that's not important as much as getting there, getting the bags, getting the seat, and arriving on time.
But from your point of view, as you look to maximize the experience, the opportunity, and indeed the revenue from the customer, where are you focusing attention in that sense?
Yeah, our attention is very much focused on enabling customers to self-serve. So it's one thing that we've learnt over the last couple of years is that customers actually want to be in control of their travel arrangements, particularly when things go wrong. So it's enabling self-service as much as we possibly can, and ensuring that at the same time, when we develop products and experiences, they are readily available and easily booked.
The self-serve, I find difficult.
Depends. There are lots of kinds of different customers, and we need to make sure that we serve all.
Right, but the chatbot is useless.
Depends on what. We need to continue to grow. But there are, you know how much did it reduce the percentage of, minutes that customers need to be waiting in the contact center because the chatbot are working properly. So
Employ more people to answer the phones.
we also have more people, but to the premium customers. So because there is many kind of different customers,
Right.
we have the premium segments and the low cost.
So maybe I think Maria is talking about is really somewhat of a de-averaging. There are the basics that, we all move towards self-service because LG is right. People want to have control, right? Nobody wants to have someone else do stuff for them if they can do it themselves. It's much easier. But there are certain use cases where, it's impossible to self-serve. You take an awful long time and you really want to reach out and speak to someone. And for that, certainly for SIA, we have really doubled down on that. We've hired more people over the course of pandemic, even though we're now dealing with fewer people, but the issues are now more complicated.
We believe that self-service is the key for customers into the future. So all of our focus is on enabling that, Richard. And, I appreciate there's challenges with travel at the moment because it is more complex and customers do need more support. But I think over time, using digital and technology to make sure that we maximise the opportunity for self-service is really important. And the industry's platforms are so legacy and so out of date when it comes to retailing. My personal view is that we need to accelerate the progress in terms of bringing us to a modern retail environment.
Right, but what are you retailing?
Well, the way the system is set up at the moment, for much of it, it's really disparate in terms of how you can distribute your product. So we have customers that tell us, and we develop products to meet their expectations and the experiences they want. So I know you've been talking a lot about Skynest over the last 48 hours, and that's an example. People told us they want to sleep when they travel on really long-haul flights. We need to have the retailing technology to be able to seamlessly sell that through all channels. And we're not there. We have a long way to go as an industry to maximise the full potential in terms of retailing.
Which puts you all in a very interesting position, doesn't it? Because on the one hand, you're dealing with the basics. Get the plane out on time, get the people there on time, and get them with their luggage. But the future is all this other stuff that you can't ignore. Not unless at your peril, and you have to give. How do you balance that between not letting anything slip through the cracks?
Well, you need to have very clear your priorities. You cannot prioritize every innovation. You need to decide what is your value proposition, and then decide where you put your resources. For example, for us, servicing is a huge opportunity, but also delivering some kind of products for the business customers, because we really believe the corporate customer is going to come back, so we really want to be very close to them. So we are working on delivering those products for those customers.
And how difficult is it now? To some extent, how far has the model, if it's not exactly been broken, it's been changed? The fighting ground, premium leisure. Yes, business is coming back, business travel is coming back, but I don't think anybody would willingly or knowingly give a number as to what you think it would finally be down, 20%, 30%. During the pandemic, we said 40, 50%. Now it's 15%. I don't know.
But I think, regardless of which segment, some of the basics remain the same. I'm sorry to keep harping back to this, but people want to arrive, and in the entire journey, they want, at least for our customers, they want good service. Whether you're a corporate customer, you're premium leisure, you want a certain level of service, and that's what we aim to deliver. So you talked about balancing, but they're not two disparate things, right? Delivering the basics, delivering it well, and really then layering on opportunities for retailing if the customer wants it, and not every customer wants it.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is you're all dealing with rebuilding the basics, but it's the layering bit. Delivering the basics is the starting point. It's the layering bit when it starts getting interesting.
Yeah, but delivering the basics, many elements. And for us, the service, our brand, our premium, that's all of the basics. It's not always just, it's not just the basics of.
Right.
I think the point I was going to make is that you need to be able to somewhat deliver the basics to have the license to be able to do some of the innovative things and then layer the things on top. And so, I mean, whether it be innovation through digital means or otherwise, we use those opportunities also to have a little bit of fun with the brand and make the customer, we'll show the customer that we know what they want. So, I mean, an example is recently we wanted to change our snack proposition on board our domestic services, right? It's a small snack. But the coverage and the brand and the positive sentiment that came through the process that we undertook of involving customers in that process was enormous.
Right, but the positive brand benefit you got could have been dramatically outweighed by a disastrous launch if you got it wrong.
Yeah, but I guess that's one of the things that we're quite comfortable with. We are very comfortable with trying things and we're not afraid to fail. We actually, within the business, believe that's a really important way to actually truly understand what your customers want. I mean, back to that snack example, we thought customers told us they wanted fresh fruit. We serve fresh fruit. It was the least taken food item of all of the things we
Really?
tried. So
well, that's like, you know, we all say we really want X.
yeah. So, I mean, there's all different ways in terms of layering.
So what did you do? Once they said we all want fresh fruit, and you actually got a whole bloody orchard on the plane already, what did you do?
We did a bunch of trials. We let customers vote on what they liked. We went through quite an extensive process, and so it wasn't a winner, and people wanted the favourite long-standing cookie time cookie. So we came up with what people wanted and delivered it to them.
Let them. You came up with what they wanted, and let them continue in their own self-deception of what they think they wanted.
Actually, we have similar experience on this. Our customers tell us they want a healthy meal.
They want?
A healthy meal, so low carbs, basically more vegetables. And as LJ has experienced, the healthy meals are the least taken. Everybody likes their steaks and, the comfort food. And so we give it back to them.
And one important thing is that what the customer wants is not only the fancy digital new customer experience, but also the personal touch that you are there taking care of them, like in the whole journey. So, for example, when we were in the middle of COVID, we were thinking that maybe the interaction with the crew should be less or something. But what we have discovered is that people are just people and wanna see the people, wanna see who is behind that. And this is actually the reason why they are coming back to travel, because they want to have experience face-to-face and see people.
Yeah. And just on the layering and offering the basics, I mean, just an example, we talked about offering basics, we talk about seamlessness, we talk about digital. One way of doing the very basics in a different way that's valued by our customers is auto check-in. Right? In the past, you had to go to the counter X number of hours before. Today, everything's all done. You don't even have to check in for our flights. So it's these small innovations that we do all the time, sometimes behind the scenes, that remove friction from our customers' journey.
I was just going to say, I mean, one of the significant things that has come out as a consequence of COVID is the fact that customers are very adamant that the standard of experience delivered to them is at the highest of standard. And so customer expectations are absolutely heightened as we've rebuilt out of COVID. And we see that through, I mean, there's been some stats quoted over the last 48 hours around the number of countries that are looking to regulate compensation, as an example, for non-delivery. And we think that's obviously going to be quite a significant burden for the industry going forward, because if you've got 100 different countries with different regulatory requirements, it's
that we do.
Yeah, exactly. And so from our perspective, we would prefer to be able to give customers what they want and respond to situations as they occur rather than being told.
I'm sure you would prefer to do that.
But
however, I mean, we don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but the compensation requirements, or at least the debate in many countries, is because of a failure to deliver.
Yep, so it's a failure of delivery, and that goes back to the point, the first and foremost thing is to get your delivery right and get the basics right. But we actually do approach it. If we have an amber weather alert, we provide customers with flex no matter what they buy. So, I mean, we approach it differently, I guess.
How difficult is it in these days, though, when there's within the product that you've got, there is such a vast range. Everything from basic economy ticket, where, frankly, if we could strap you to the wing, we would, and don't even think of putting a bag anywhere other than under the seat, versus, you know, first class or
Premium economy.
premium, or the number one, please, where would you like to sit? You can sit anywhere you like. How difficult is it for you as CCOs to create all of that?
I personally think it's really important. It's about giving customers choice, right? And we give customers, you know, 7 different choices in our new product offering that's coming next year. So it's very important to be able to respond to different customers' needs and give them the options that they're after.
There are travelers that fly for many different reasons, and they are not willing to pay the same thing. So in order to have passengers that can have low fares, we need to have others that pay high fares. And for that, we need to fulfill a different product because it cannot be the same.
I think for us it's a little bit different
Right.
because we are pitched and positioned as a premium airline. So, you know, your example about basic economy being strapped to the wing, I think as a brand, there is a basic, for even the most basic premium economy product that we have defined. And beyond that, you know, there is a layering, there is some differentiation, but we do protect the minimum of what we give our customers. So we certainly do not fragmentize, or we do not strip it, even the basic product, down to the bare bones. There is a level that we protect that the customer knows he will get when he travels with Singapore Airlines.
Right.
For example, during COVID, we have seen a demand that in our case we didn't see before of travelers traveling for leisure, but that wanted to have a more premium experience. So we are developing products to address those needs. And this is a win-win for everyone, for the customers, for everyone, for the employees, for ourselves.
When you're developing these things, you are, of course, looking over your shoulder at each other, in a sense. And unless there's a dramatic cultural difference between the different markets, do you all pretty much come up with the same result? You know, does your research all show you the same sort of ideas of what customers want? The basics. Customers want the value proposition. It's really a question of how you deliver it within the concept of your own airline.
Yeah, I think it is about the execution and how you develop the product to meet those customer needs.
I want to turn, Vandy, for the last few minutes to talk about, and it is all, as I say, you know, male talking about female executives is always a dodgy, it's always a dodgy exercise, fraught with difficulties. But I've done it many times on the air, so let's go for it. Look, you've all reached the very highest levels with the prospect of getting even higher within the company or another airline. What has been the most difficult part of that? And I realize that when you're doing it, because you're in the middle of the firestorm, look, you know, it doesn't look that difficult, or it was difficult, but it seems like it was on. But if you now look back, what was the most difficult part?
I don't want to say it was the most difficult part, but for me, I had 4 children along the way as I built my career. And so I think if I wind back to 30 years ago when I started in aviation, 30 roughly, then it was a very different time, right? And so I'm pleased to see that things have developed much more differently, which enables females really to have a family and continue their career.
Oh, I'm sure if you started 30 years ago and you've had 4 kids on the way, I'm sure you have an entire fund of misogynistic stories over the years being at you, don't you?
Possibly, but I might share those.
You know,
Yeah, look, it hasn't been without its challenges, but as I say, I think the industry and society has come a really long way in that regard, and I think organisations are much more conscious around enabling female talent to continue their career and not be slowed down through having families. I mean, I was fortunate, I had a very supportive family that helped me a lot, but I also know a lot of people that I see that work in my team that don't have that luxury, so...
I think this is actually not only difficult for women, but also for men.
Totally.
Because things are changing, it's also difficult for men, because things are changing. Men are right now more caring about, taking care of the children and everything, and we need to find ways to conciliate family, personal things, and your professional career, but for men and for women and for everyone.
Okay, but how did you do it? How did you get to this?
I have a very supportive family also, and I have a great team. It's very, very important that you really trust the team you work with. You really enjoy your work and put a lot of passion. Yes.
That given. You're not getting away with that. There has to be a determination, you might want to determine or a passion to weather the storms. If only we know this to be the case, if only because so many women don't manage to get to that next level. It is that middle cadre of executives that where the problem is.
I think, if you ask me, and it's not really what was the most difficult thing. When I started out in my career, I won't name how many years ago, how many decades ago, what struck me really is the lack of role models. I didn't see females in senior executive. I didn't think about it, and nor did I kind of aspire or have the ambition to be. But right now, there are women who come up to me and say, I see that you are where you are, and it gives me the vision or the ambition that I can get there too. So I think having positive role models is what is different today for the younger generation of women.
But
I was just going to say, I think also upon reflection for me, I think it's having a willingness to take opportunities as they present themselves, even if they stretch you way outside of your comfort zone. I mean, 27 years in the commercial corporate side of the airline, on the 5th of February 2020, I took on running our global airport operation. And so for me, the 9 months I was in that role was the steepest learning curve I think I've ever had in my career. But upon reflection, it was probably one of the most rewarding periods.
So if you now take your seniority and translate it down to what you want to change for a young age, because you're talking about 30 years ago, but 30 years ago there were few female executives, and to be frank, they weren't females' best friends. They weren't women's best friend in many cases, and we all know this to have been the case. So now, with your seniority, how do you create an environment? What do you want to change?
I want to make sure that people have the opportunity to do what they want to do, that they have personalised development, that they have coaching, mentoring, and I really would like to think that you can instill confidence in young people, because I think whether it be female or male or whatever the diversity and inclusion piece is, confidence is always one of those significant things that let people down because they don't appreciate their own capability. And I think confidence and a very clear plan is incredibly important for people to progress.
And to some extent, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say that also having role models, because this is a virtuous cycle. If you have more role models, you will be able to, and not only women, but also more diverse role models, leaders that are leading in a different way with different values.
So how important then is, if we shift away slightly from just the sort of the fairly narrow focus of even though it's half the population of females, but you start looking at the wider LGBT, transgender, the variety of workers and colleagues that we now have, that makes it much more challenging at one level, but rewarding at another.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's all about giving people equal opportunities. I mean, speaking as a female, I wouldn't want affirmative action to be given opportunities just purely because I belong to a minority group. So I think the really important thing is, you know, regardless of variety.
No, but you don't want affirmative action, but you may need an accommodation within a structure so that you can have the family, you can do this, that, or that,
Yes.
or which is not really affirmative action; it's an accommodation.
Yeah. So I think in terms of accommodation in the female context, I think LG mentioned it. I mean, I'm also a parent of two kids. It's really the ability to re-enter into their career when you've taken a break, right? And that's, for a female, that's important. Is that necessarily the same for, say, you know, different groups of people? I don't think so. They may need something else. So I think an accommodative environment, that's true, but not in the affirmative action way.
Fine, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that something that really works, I think, is having targets. At the beginning, I was completely opposite to that idea because I thought that, I don't know, it's like helping that we really don't need. But then, when we have put some targets in our companies, at least in my experience, it really helps because we are, you know, business persons and we are focused to following the target. So when you have the target, and you are going to make sure that you will have a diverse team that is good and that will meet other targets, profitability and everything. So I think it really helps.
I was just going to add that I think within any organisation, putting gender diversity aside and looking at diversity from a broader perspective, I think there needs to be a mindset and an appreciation of how much value having a diverse group of people working together can bring. I mean, it just brings a whole different level of thinking, and I think you can't underestimate the value of that.
Okay, so final question to each of you. Not what have you learned as you've climbed the corporate ladder. What would you have done differently? What would you have changed? What would you have amended?
I would have had a clearer plan, and I possibly...
A clearer plan or just a plan?
A plan. And I would have been more forthright in my views along the way. So rather than tending to sit back and observe, I possibly would have been more forthright in participating.
Do you say that with the position of seniority now, looking back?
Potentially, yes.
What would you have changed, done differently?
I mean, it sounds like a cop-out, but I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think I have, I think I've given it my all in terms of being authentic, in terms of, you know, you mentioned passion at the start. I've always adopted and embraced every role with passion, and I kind of got to where I am possibly because of that, so.
I don't know, maybe I would have said no in a couple of occasions because I'm a person that only want to, you know, to please, to make sure that everything is right. So maybe I would have said no in a couple of occasions to create, you know, different...
Yeah, I venture to suggest that's being said with the experience of seniority. But if you said that to somebody of a younger age, they'd still be terrified. Finally, bad news on the commercial front for you.
Why is that?
Your boss has given away 2 of your Skynest seats.
Oh, has he? Did I get to go with you?
He's now giving away 3 seats. Air New Zealand is going to have a very difficult year. Just give me more than 4 hours, that's all. In fact, she's in a very generous mood. We can take anybody else who'd like to come along on the trip. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel.